Wait, where did I put my lucky rabbit's foot?
All right, y'all. We are in the home of Kylie, who had an episode before. We are in Ruby Manor. I'm so excited to be here. We are doing the Lucky Rabbits talk show, which I started with my partner, Mason, who is kind of taking the tech background. We're super lucky to have a guest who is a local, also a practitioner at Ruby Manor. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Katy Christie. I am the founder and owner of Movevolve Yoga and Movement. I am a certified personal trainer, yoga instructor, certified health coach, have a master's degree in biotechnology. I spent 16 years in corporate biotech and finally left to pursue, I don't even like the word wellness, it's too much of a buzzword for me, but human well-being, I guess is the best way I can put it, to really focus in on teaching movement classes, teaching yoga, mindfulness, personal training, and holistic health coaching.
I love this because so far all of our people who have had kind of under like that wellness umbrella, right, is like Reiki masters or healers, and so what you do is more of like a physical kind of movement, and I think that that's really important because like where you can still focus on energy centers, you are bringing out like more of like a body kind of activation.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there's like more blood flow, there's more like exercise, getting more oxygen.
And connecting this with this.
Yes.
Because we spend so much of our lives disconnecting from our bodies.
Hmm.
And Reiki and things like that also help bring you into your body, but movement and connecting with your breath and your mind simultaneously can really bring you back to parts that you don't even notice you've lost touch with.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel that 100%. I know for me, anytime I feel like, I don't know, like grounded, it's times that I'm like running or get some exercise into my life, and it's so easy to get stagnant, and you can really feel kind of that energy kind of stop flowing.
Absolutely.
And so the direct movement is like a really good way to touch base with really like beyond energy centers, like the actuality of who you are and like your physical kind of vessel, right? So there's like a spiritual element anytime that you're activating that literal vessel that you're in.
Yes, absolutely.
I love that. So the main kind of, what's your main modality? Like, do you have like a preference towards like yoga or?
I say I do yoga and movement or fitness. I make sure I keep them separate. I do integrate some yoga asana postures, and I do integrate breathwork and mindfulness into my fitness classes. But even though I utilize some yoga asanas in my fitness, I try and make it very clear that this is the spiritual practice of yoga, and yoga is not a fitness practice.
Yeah.
While it can be difficult and it can work your body, the entire intent of that work is mind-body connection and pushing yourself to an edge, discomfort, whereas fitness is that, it's fitness.
Yeah, absolutely.
And while I try and make fitness joyful movement, I still want to keep them separate. I don't think I have one I prefer. I get different things from both of them.
And when you use, so the term asana, I'm not familiar with.
Asana, it literally means posture or pose. So when
Nice.
you hear like child's pose is balasana. Bala is child. Asana means pose, posture.
Oh, nice. So that's like almost everything that you're doing in that.
So when you hear the Sanskrit words for yoga, and most of them end in asana, that literally just means X pose or X posture.
I love that. That, like the technical term, but it also kind of pulls in like that spiritual history to
Yes, yeah. And I try and use as much of the Sanskrit as I can pronounce properly.
it. Yes.
Again, out of respect for the culture. And
Yeah. Paying like homage and making sure that you really are connected to the root of the practice.
Especially because as a white person, it's a very fine line into appropriation for yoga.
Yeah.
So
We were just talking about that in my last interview. Is like where does being kind of like literally a white person play into like how to like respect and also perform kind of different things, because there is like an exploration of different practices that's like needed to have a full, robust, kind of well-rounded but then it is a matter of making sure that you kind of keep those pieces, acknowledge those pieces, because there is in spirituality, and this has come up a lot in all of them, it's I don't know, there's no way to practice it without making sure that you're informed by all of the different roots of where you're coming from, because it's easy to lose those roots, kind of.
Absolutely. I'm actually, my current continuing education course for my yoga to keep, so I will never lose my training certification, but to keep as a registered yoga teacher, which is a whole other thing, and that's actually being revisited by the organization as well as to whether continuing education hours, which cost a lot of money, should be what we use, or whether we go to testing people.
Nice.
I just did the poll for it. I said that we should move to testing because I personally think that having spent thousands and thousands of dollars to keep just as a registered person is a little inaccessible and also points to appropriation.
Yes.
That's a whole, I could stand on a soapbox
It's
for that for
kind of
hours.
It's gatekeeping,
Yeah,
right?
but I am taking a CEU course from Susanna Barkataki, who is a Southeast Asian practitioner, and it is literally called Embracing Yoga's Roots. So the entire 30-hour course, or 20-hour course, is focusing on how we don't appropriate the practice, how to utilize it, how to stay true to its roots. And my lovely partner actually bought that for me as a late Christmas present so that I could take that continuing education.
What a good, because like sometimes gifts are just like things that we accumulate, and sometimes gifts are things that uplift us and keep us going and like really support, right, like individual. I love that. That's adorable.
I cried.
Yes. Yeah, certain things are really just more meaningful. And then that's an experience which no one can take from you.
Yeah.
And it helps you help other people.
Yes.
That's beautiful. So what does your practice look like in kind of like as an instructor, as like a student, which...
Sure. Right now, just because of the cost of things, my own practice is very much home-based. I don't go to any classes as much as I'd love to. We have a lot of good practitioners around here too. Right now, a lot of it is either I pull something from online that is a practitioner I trust for movement or yoga, either, or I do my own.
Right.
In-house. I would like to say it's every day.
Yep.
With that said, if you're following, especially with yoga, there are things that are every day in yoga that are outside just the movement piece, or even breath work, or so there's the idea of shausha, which is cleanliness. So like I will try and take, when I'm cleaning my space, to practice shausha, to think of it as a yogic, like I am centering myself in my space. I'm making this pure and clean to live in. And so I find that the best, most sustainable way to have a yoga practice, well, I should be doing asana every day, I really should. My 3 dogs are probably an excuse I use to not get as much in as I should. But I do try and bring in parts of the practice that are part of the 8 limbs of yoga that aren't the well-known ones necessarily into little bits of my day.
Yes.
Same with my magic practitioner. I follow Molly Donlan. Do you follow her?
I haven't.
I would say she's an influencer. She's actually from Maine.
Cool.
And she is known for practicing mundane magic. She actually has a book coming out soon. And it's
Love
how you
that.
integrate magic into your everyday. Like, I have 3 dogs and a cat. Putting up an altar anywhere in my house is not going to happen.
Yes.
So, like, I consider my practice a lot of times when I'm cooking or cleaning or, those everyday things. And I don't want to steal her thing. Her thing is mundane magic, but it is a good way to describe it.
Yes, absolutely. And when you have pets too, it's almost like you are always doing that cleaning. You're always keeping that, whether it's for them or for you or for cleanliness. That's just essential to having them, which I think is part of why having pets is so spiritually grounding. It's a good way to like practice nonverbal communication, and also it keeps you accountable for taking care of someone else.
Yes. As well as discomfort and having to deal with the fact that things aren't always in your control.
Oh my god, yes. I have rabbits, and the rabbits are a great example of that is they were playing with like a wicker thing and they tore it apart, and I'm so happy that they had fun, but now I have to go in right after I vacuumed and pick up all the pieces. But yeah, it absolutely is a piece of mindfulness and making sure that they enjoy what they're doing. But when they enjoy what they're doing, there is absolutely housework that needs to be done.
Yeah. Yep.
So when you're working with your clients, who kind of comes to you? What are the problems that they have, and how do you help them work through it?
Sure. For personal training, so Kylie, who's home we're in,
Yes.
lovely home we're in. Kylie is my first personal training client. As I said, I was working a corporate job literally up until the first week of January. So I was working 40 hours a week and tending my business, and I'm also the sales and marketing director for my partner's cannabis grow.
Beautiful.
Medical cannabis grow. So I was doing 4-ish jobs because I'm also a burlesque performer. And so Kylie was my first client. I'm about to open up and start doing more work to build more clientele. But people come to me because I'm not going to cookie cutter. So while I am certified and I do listen to my certifying bodies, I've been doing this work for over 20 years now. And so not personal training per se, but I've been teaching movement and health coaching for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And what I have found is that do these exercises this many times and, eat this much macro, like it doesn't work for most people. It really doesn't. It's not sustainable for most people. You have to have a very specific type of brain for that to be the thing that sticks.
Also, we all have different types of bodies, and our bodies respond to different things, and we have different problems we have to work through. And sometimes, it's kind of a, no offense to anyone who does it that way, but sometimes it's kind of a cop-out.
Yeah, yes, it's a very, there's the niche for those people, and to be honest, building mine is even harder because most of the people looking for it are the people who want that type of training. Yep. So I actually will say that I have a harder time building my clientele because my clientele are the people who don't want to set foot in the gym. My clientele are the people who want to move but have been made to feel uncomfortable in movement spaces, who have gone to yoga classes where they feel like the person's just showing off by being too bendy as opposed to actually grounding into the space. And again, that's not all yoga. I'm not saying that's all yoga instructors either. That's just what my typical clientele tends to be. The people who are afraid to go to group fitness, the people who have never felt comfortable working out in public.
We also definitely have a culture of that, right? There is kind of like a competitiveness in those classes. And whether or not those classes are actually like that, there is kind of like a cultural perception that we have that like keeps it intimidating. I think the same with just the gym, even just going into a gym space to do a treadmill, like we know that there are people who are there to kind of show off or judge other people. And whether they actually are judging you or not, it's really easy if you are a self-conscious person to project that onto them. And so if you can do it in your home or follow along with like a video, then that's always going to be kind of a more comforting place to start. And also, it sounds like you are empowering people to learn those things specifically for themselves and then practice on their own.
Yes, I'm really adamant about, and in my group classes, not so much because I can't take the time to focus in, but form is really important. So like last night here at Ruby Manor, I only had one person. The other people who had registered couldn't come for whatever reason.
Right.
So last night, he's a person who's been coming to my classes pretty religiously for a while. Since it was just me and him, I went through moves that I use all the time, and we worked on his form. So that now in my classes, he'll get a greater gain and be safer.
Which informs the rest of your clients, right? Because now you've learned from that instruction to recognize when other people are doing that. So you probably learn a lot. We talk about this a lot as readers too, right? Like we learn from our clients and we learn about ourselves helping other people. And so do you feel like when you're helping these other people, that helps you?
Oh, absolutely. One of the people are probably sick of hearing it in my classes. One of the things I'll say, remember to breathe, and then I'll say, guys, just so you know, if I said that, it's probably because I wasn't doing it.
Yep, exactly.
If you hear me make a correction, it's probably because I was doing the thing that I shouldn't have been doing.
Yep.
So I do find instructing people, well, in some ways, like, I have to have my own practice because when I'm instructing people, I can't focus on me. And so I still have to have my own practice because I used to have people be like, you work out all the time. I'm like, no, but I don't work out for myself. I'm still not able to focus on me because I'm still external to my own body. With that said, it does make you more mindful of like, well, I need to be a good example too. So drop drop your shoulders, release your jaw. You know, like
Take a deep breath.
Mm-hmm. When I work with Kylie, both of us have a tendency to like lock our joints.
Yep.
And it, especially working with her one-on-one, means that I have to be mindful of not doing it myself too, because that's how you create injury. I had a back surgery in 2021 from probably any number of years of dance and fitness being done incorrectly or with poor instruction. Long-term injury, like literally started as a kid, as a dancer as a kid, but it's made me more mindful, especially of making sure that people understand that just because the bodies around them are moving a certain way doesn't mean yours is ever going to.
Yes, that's a great one, because a lot of people are like differently abled, right? Or like have different issues. I mean, specifically joints. Everybody has like a different way that they carry themselves or they lock themselves, and so like being mindful of that in yourself helps you kind of address it with other people. So with dancing, I will say, you said you've been dancing for a long time?
Yeah, since I was a kid.
Dancing longer than you've been doing like fitness?
Yeah, I started dancing when I was 3.
What kind of dance?
Ballet, tap, jazz, primarily. Trained in some contemporary, burlesque since 2015.
I was going to say, and so that kind of translates into burlesque. Do you feel like you can, burlesque is one that I've noticed people, it's another one that is a crossover, right? Like a lot of spiritual people who need to express themselves in different ways find burlesque, and it's almost like it is a spiritual practice in a way, because it's embracing kind of this, not just sexuality, but it's embracing this expression.
Yes.
I
Absolutely.
love that.
Yeah, it's as a person who has grown up with an eating disorder, body dysmorphia issues, who have gained and lost weight. Like before my back surgery in 2016, I was 60 pounds lighter than I am now, and who's had that body that my whole life is just yo-yoed. Burlesque has seen me through various sizes, and it's one of those reminders too. Like it's so funny to people like, you must be an exhibitionist. I'm not.
Yes.
Not in the least.
But it
Like,
helps you kind
but
of.
yeah, it's that you get that adrenaline and you get that out of body kind of moment.
And validation from, if you do it in front of crowds,
Oh,
like
yeah.
performances,
Yeah.
that gives a lot of validation, because the crowd is always going to cheer you on, the crowd is always going to appreciate you. And when I've gone to burlesque shows, I love to see more diverse body shapes or more diverse expressions,
Yeah.
because there is something to be said about, if everybody was a cookie cutter on stage, then the whole show would kind of start to get mundane.
Yep.
But when you see different people do different things, like, so do you do burlesque around here? Like,
Yeah,
with the
I'm
groups?
with Blush and Bashful Burlesque Collective out of Bath. Our first show was at Novel on New Year's Eve. We were supposed to have one this weekend, but the snow is looking like it's gonna,
Right?
because it's on Sunday afternoon, which means it's probably
Already kind of a tough one for people to do, because they're trying to, Sunday is a
yeah,
very-
Sunday 1 p.m. and it's looking like we're gonna be right in the middle of the storm at that point right now,
God
which
bless.
is kind of a bummer.
Well,
But we'll see. If not, we have Teas After Dark in March up in Bath,
I love that.
which is more seedy, more dark, more.
Yes.
But our New Year's Eve one was just kind of fun, and I used to dance with them. Burlesque were wonderful as well.
I love them burlesque.
Yeah,
for
I used
the
to dance with
record.
them. The schedule just didn't work for me. I love them
Yep.
all dearly. It just my schedule and the schedule of them was just too much at
Yeah.
the time. So yes, go and support them, absolutely. Go support Blush and Bashful Burlesque Collective, support Port City Peep Show, all the groups around, Mystique, La Petite,
Yes.
Mystique. They have a website called The Main Stage that has most of the shows that are going on, both drag and burlesque.
I'll have to keep that in mind, because I
yeah.
really love going to those.
Yeah, The Main Stage. You can follow The Main Stage on Instagram too.
Yeah.
You can get through La Petite's Instagram to The Main Stage. They have created this great website and Instagram account that just basically follows and posts for everyone performing in the area.
Yeah, and they're a really great example. I don't go to too many shows, but they're a really great example of different modalities of it, right? Like they have people playing saxophone. They have, is it Flemme de la Creme?
Creme de la Femme.
Creme de la Flemme?
Yep.
Oh my god. As far as like when we talk about like burlesque having diverse different, she is just
I've performed with Creme since 2017, off and on, like in
I love
various
that.
shows. And I literally watched once, so we used to all perform in Auburn.
Yep.
Auburn has some really intense blue laws when it comes to what you can show. You can't show underboob.
Interesting.
So we used to have to wear these like giant pasties.
Yeah.
Or like undercut bras and stuff.
Right.
And I watched Krem at one show do an incredible burlesque while poetry reading, like basically middle finger to the establishment. It was like incredible.
I've seen like the salad one and the hot dog one, and it's just this comedic break in between that is absolutely still in the style.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, I really appreciate and admire, and I'm like a little jealous of people who do burlesque because it also is like a great way to get your body moving, and yeah, that validation and that energy from the crowd and you're giving something and taking something.
Yep.
But I can see where you're running businesses and you
You
have clients. Yes. I mean, it really does. Life gets in the way sometimes, but the fact that you can make time for it and that you have that practice is really already an impressive thing.
It helps. It's my way of still having art.
Yeah. And do you feel like you can incorporate like kind of your witchcraft and your vibe of witchcraft into it, or?
I have. It depends on the show. I've now I think I've performed it 3 times now. I do a piece to Sierra's version of Paint It Black, where I do a bloodletting ritual on stage. So I have a dagger with pipettes full of blood on the back, and I do like bloodletting type stuff.
Yeah.
So I do. That's one of the ways I've integrated it. So shown like ritual. Not that I think the bloodletting is a mainstream thing, but when you're on stage, you have to do something that shows up.
Yeah, like a dramatic kind of showing of things,
Yeah.
for sure.
So I've also seen Port City Peep Show years ago when they would do a Halloween show at House of Music, which doesn't happen anymore. But they used to have a bruja who would do something.
Yes.
Like usually they would have like singing bowls or do some kind of Latinx type ritual.
Yes.
Which was really cool to watch.
I love that. Like and you don't get that a lot in Maine, right? Because you're performing in like southern Maine, but you are hitting that tip of central Maine.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I love living in Maine, Maine does have some aspects to it that are not just conservative, but sometimes bordering on. I guess we'll leave it at conservative, but they're bordering on a type of conservative that is puritanical, absolutely. And in New England, we really do still have residual energy of that puritanical kind of suppression, and breaking free of it is harder than people who are in different states or different countries might think.
Yeah, absolutely. Performing in Auburn was always a wild juxtaposition.
Auburn is a really tough one. Yeah, that's the area where we start to see like that puritanicalism start to kind of border on Nazism in a way that we won't go too far into, but we try to stay away from.
Or people who didn't understand that we weren't always going to take clothes off at a burlesque show.
Yes. Like, it's not a strip show. It's not.
No. And that's not to say that we, like, anyone who tries to distinguish burlesque from stripping, that's not okay either. Like, we are strippers, and we owe our roots to strippers.
Love that.
And sex workers. So I just want to put that out there. I'm, like, anyone who's like, but you don't do a stripper. Yes, we do. Like,
I love that. It's just not
with
the
that said,
full
that's not the full
movie
show.
type.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so we would have performers who would just do dancing sometimes. And I had once watched a crowd boo one of them to tears because she wasn't stripping.
Oh, no.
And it was really tragic because she's a really talented flow artist.
Yeah.
And so just reminding people that really what we do, I shouldn't even say what we do is burlesque, what we do is cabaret.
That's a good way to put it.
To be honest. Because burlesque in and of itself, while it is cabaret, still owes its roots to stripping. And it is that fine line because you don't want to take away from that root and you don't want to disrespect strippers and sex workers.
Yeah.
So the people who don't strip, it's still burlesque, but it's more on the cabaret side.
Yeah. Yeah, and all of that is rooted in like very important forms of entertainment. I mean, that they literally, there's a reason that they call sex work like the oldest profession. I was going to say that too, because there is just an inherent need for it in society, even if we shame it, put it down, kind of hide it.
Well, how much of sex work is literally people just wanting someone to talk to?
That is honestly very valid. That, you could go into that for days.
So many sex workers say, like, most of the time, like, not that they aren't doing sexual acts as well, but a lot of them say at the end of the day, a lot of these people just want someone to feel companionship with.
And acknowledge them. Mm-hmm. Yes. Interesting. And stripping too. I mean, there is that same kind of spiritual expression. Like, it's something you wouldn't think of very often, but it is that same moving, getting your body flowing, getting your blood flowing. Not to break completely off of that, but how did you find kind of your witchy side? Like where did the...
So I grew up in southeastern Ohio. Southeastern Ohio is potentially, I would liken it to northern Maine and how white it is, where I grew up. And all very religious. Like I was raised very liberal Protestant in the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, which is currently fighting with Elon Musk because it is so liberal as a church. He specifically attacked the ELCA a couple weeks ago, but that's the church I was raised in. Yeah. And with that said, we were surrounded by Church of Christ folks, Baptists who their kids weren't allowed to go to school dances.
Yeah, right.
And it's not saying all Church of Christ and all Baptists. This is just the people I grew up around. So, please, again, these are the people I grew up around. I know many Baptists who were allowed to go to dances.
Yeah, and I will say that there's room for Christianity as a spiritual practice. If anyone watches these and has kind of a more non-traditional but very Christian background, there's a few people I have my eyes on that are more evangelical or from evangelical roots, and I want to hear how they kind of incorporate that into their life, because that's an interesting place to come from, because it is a very spiritual practice. Kylie and I were talking in our interview, and I've gotten this a few times, is Catholicism is very much not a cover for, but incorporative of those ritualistic kind of...
rosaries
Yep.
were taken from Southeast Asia, prayer beads that are used in yoga. That's why I love this. My partner got me for Christmas. It's basically a pagan rosary.
Oh, I kind of noticed those.
It doesn't have 108 beads on it, but yeah, rosaries were a direct line from prayer beads, malas, things like that. And yeah, there's a lot of deep spirituality in it, and a lot of it that was the Christian Renaissance that really started stealing from paganism to cover up paganism.
Yeah.
But initially, there was a lot more cohabitation.
Interesting. Yes, because as they kind of moved
because
into
they were
different
persecuted
cultures,
by Roman culture.
Yep. And as Rome, the kind of Roman Western Empire kind of moved over, when they took over areas, they wanted to convert them to Christianity, but in order to do that, they had to let them still practice their things.
Yes. And that was not until Emperor Constantine. So prior to Emperor Constantine, Romans were burning Christians just like Jewish folk, just like Muslims.
Right.
So
the persecution, it is an endless thing. Going back to literally that vibe of more conservative places not quite opening up to sexual work or sexual expression. It is something that you have to let people have, and also when you stifle it too much, it starts to be problematic to the soul.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and yeah. So I grew up in that very, very conservative place while in a more liberal practicing Christian family. When I was going through my confirmation in church, was when, this sounds really cheesy, but it's when the movie The Craft came out.
Oh, interesting. I think the movie The Craft did a lot for everyone.
I think so. And then the sequel actually a lot too, because that was even more, I don't know if you've seen the sequel. The sequel actually had pagan practitioners on set, which I love. And helping them make sure they were doing things appropriately, and I thought that was very interesting. But yes, the first Craft came out when I was going through my Lutheran catechism.
Yep.
And being a 12-year-old girl at the time, I was enamored.
Yes.
Also, probably should have known I was queer.
Yes. Which is something the sequel also included. Is one of them is a trans woman, which is, or trans girl, however you want to, I don't know how old they even were, but...
I think they're supposed to be 15 or so.
So, trans girl.
Yeah.
But it's an amazing thing to see that incorporation. I kind of called the sequel to The Craft, the TikTok generations, right? There was a little more glitter, a little more glamour, a little more glitz.
A little sparklier.
Yeah, which I think is just important to be able to adjust adjust where we're at for who's learning, because it is very informative. But so do you feel like you recognized some of those same religious themes that you were...
I think so, and I think it's hard to look back on now. I know I became very into researching at the time Wicca, obviously before I deep dove into the roots of Wicca. So I didn't know the word pagan then. And I remember my minister actually telling my mother that I could get kicked out of catechism because I started just looking into various religions.
Right.
And my mom was like, I want her to do that. I don't want her to make this decision without knowing what she's doing.
Also, it informs itself. As you learn the history, you learn a lot more about why you're doing the things you're doing in church.
Yes.
I know I learned really recently that the King James Bible is the Bible that we use, and it kind of was rewritten by like a council of men who were appointed by King James, and it turns out that when we look into King James, he was a little bit on the on the gay side, which is really interesting because I think that was also, you might know this, does that predate the times that they put homosexuality in the Bible as far as a word?
I actually don't know. Original translations wouldn't have had that because I don't want to misspeak. I actually have a friend who is Israeli and could tell me the Hebrew better.
Right.
But I feel like the verbiage is different.
Yeah,
and that's me coming from, like I guess I don't want to overspeak or overstep incorrectly, but I'm almost positive the verbiage is different for translations like that. I would ask her if I...
Yeah, and there is something to be said. I know also in my research that there was a point where homosexuality was fairly accepted, practiced as far as like more fluidity, but there's a theory running that where it became kind of an evil part of society was where, this might be going too far, but but where anal sex is more likely to cause like fissures and infection, and they were seeing people become sicker more often than heterosexual only practicing people. And so there is like this belief that maybe that those illnesses passed, or those like, because now we have much safer practices for it, but before they had those safer practices or knew quite how to perform it, it was more dangerous inherently, and that back then would have been seen as like, because
God punishing you.
Medicine back then was very, I mean, even herbal medicine was very kind of,
yeah, that's risky.
Religious leaning, and I'm glad that we're where we're at.
And some of the move away from accepting homosexuality and even transness in particular was pushing back on Roman rule. Because Romans were very much into like orgies and open sexuality and things of that nature.
True.
Most Romans proudly showed their concubines.
And now we talk about that a lot more. Now we're able to recognize those things, but they were buried for a very long time in that puritanical tradition. I wonder more about that. But also that information is very difficult to find, and you have to take everything with a grain of salt now because those times are gone. So we can't quite study, we can't quite speak on things, but we can look back and we can extrapolate.
Yeah.
So don't take anything we're saying as gospel, literally gospel.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of those texts were ones that were also burned in Germany. So
yes.
A lot of those historical texts.
Yeah, and they're all in such different languages that you have to be like a doctorate to be able to go through them.
Really?
Yeah.
Legitimately. The Humanity Archive, it's specifically for U.S. history. The Humanity Archive is a good one.
Is that?
Jermaine Fowler, he has an Instagram account. He has a book called The Humanity Archive, and it's the look at U.S. history, specifically through the Black lens. And it's really good. Samuel James, who's local, I'm sure you've heard of, no? Local musician Samuel James has a weekly newsletter that has a lot of history, Black history, and like unknown history.
We need to keep that. We need to keep that, and we have to keep that in written form. I notice a lot of people right now are preserving books for that same reason, like what happened in Germany. Like the written work. One of my guests was talking about how if you can grab a paper copy of anything, the paper copy is something that you should have around, because the internet is filled with information, but more and more we're seeing that the internet can be filtered, censored, deleted. And I mean, like, even with like Wikipedia, right? It's a
Very
lovely
editable.
source. It's very editable. And with AI right now being able to track down certain things and the bots online, you have to be so careful because we are turning to a point where it's almost like instead of book burnings, we're seeing the deletion of certain things. I mean, especially like the White House website lately has been. So I don't know how long people will be watching these, but we are in 2025, the beginning of 2025. We are really seeing how much the internet can just be wiped away, and our information can be taken from us. And it's easy to think that you have like the whole of human knowledge in your hand, but you have the whole of human knowledge that they'll let you have in your hand.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's, as a woman who worked for 16 years in the STEM field, watching all these women in STEM being currently erased is really difficult.
Scary.
Yeah.
Because those are the people who are doing, statistically, a lot of the work as far as master's degrees held right now, doctorate degrees, higher education is very much.
A lot of women in NASA.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as we know, not enough women are included in cohorts of scientific studies to begin with.
Yes.
So, like, there's still overwhelmingly numbers of men, cis men in particular,
Exactly.
right around the age of 25 to 55, specifically, and that's obviously not all of us.
No,
So,
not at all. And we're literally seeing, like, the government is wiping away terms like women and female and gender and diversity literally from their documents. Like, they're not allowed to, not to get too political, but also it is a very inherently political time, especially to talk about
well, and to be
queerness
even
or-
in a movement space where I tell people, like, you know, I mean, you see what I post. I post political things on my business page.
It's such
and
a balance to do that.
I'm at the point where if that turns someone off, even someone who might be drawn to me, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, right. Like they might not be approaching your practice from a authentic kind of good place, and working with them might not be the best for them, because it's not like if you have differing views you shouldn't seek out practitioners, or you shouldn't move, or things like that. But it is the thing where you need to find someone who fits with you. Like if you fit in more of these spaces, then God bless that you find these spaces, but don't damage other people, obviously. And maybe those spiritual practices that you find can inform how you don't damage people. And that's something really important that we're moving towards, is spirituality, religion, kind of cohesion between those, and ethics, and ethically practicing, which goes back to what you were saying, making sure that you find the roots of your practice and you pay homage to them and you're really respectful. So do more research, do deeper digs. Do deeper digs into what you're doing and the people who are around you, and make sure that you align. Especially right now, alignment is really important, because you must know this in the wellness community. There's a reason that you kind of called it a problem.
I don't like saying wellness.
Yes, because I had someone who said a quote that was really interesting to me. The wellness community can be a very direct route into kind of the cult mentality, drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yes,
Yeah.
very much so. It can be very turfy.
Yeah. Oh,
which
absolutely.
is very upsetting to me. Unfortunately, the performance community, and luckily not around here, but the performance community can also be.
Yeah.
And there's that intersection in the Venn diagram of super conservative anti-vax folks and uber liberal wellness folks.
Yeah, and where
And
you're
the
coming,
anti-science.
where you're coming from a science background, I personally think that when you have a more academic approach to things to begin with, your practice is better informed. And there's people who kind of have, like, they come from a place of feeling and expression, and those people, for sure, there's a lot of validity to it, but it's just too easy to start feeling past facts. And you can kind of question things, you can do research into things, but it's too easy to cut yourself off from, I don't know, for me, like, especially like astrology and practices like that, I find myself going towards the science. Even crystals is one where I think if you don't understand what am I think? Geology? Geology. If you don't understand geology, then it's going to become harder for you to work with crystals because it's kind of one of those things where you have to understand what makes quartzes different, what makes quartzes the same, what quartz does technologically for us, and what it can do untechnologically. I see a lot of people say that quartz is used in computers and therefore it's like a computing thing, but it's used in computers in a specific way where it's in microchips and it is definitely pivotal to how we work. Was it Jill Stein said that crystals are the only technology we need? And it's like, right, but applied the way they're applied. And it gets too easy to kind of ignore the scientific side. I think spirituality is tied inherently to science.
Yeah.
A lot of science has been seen as spirituality. So where you're coming from it at like a physiological level is very interesting to me because coming from like an informed place with like the biology of it. So you said, not to go kind of skate past your degrees, you said biophysiology? Biotech.
I worked for years in molecular specifically, so DNA-based technologies.
How do you feel like that informs the spiritual side of what you do? I'm very intrigued by that.
So, at the end of the day, we still learn things about it.
Yes.
And this so I absolutely understand fear in vaccines, especially in science, because every body is so different. Like that's the magic of it, right? Like I can theorize till the cows come home, but there's always going to be a fringe case.
And you need the scientific research. You need to be able to do those. I know right now gene therapy is something that is kind of under attack also, where you take a virus and you change the DNA inside of it so that it can... I'm not a scientist, so I'm kind of really generalizing this, but where you can use like a virus to deliver a part of your DNA that's missing or problematic.
Yep.
And that is something that I know funding for has kind of been completely shut off for. But it's also saving lives.
Yes.
And while it isn't necessarily too well known or like a household information, it is definitely, if it's saving lives, something that we should be experimenting into. So that work is really interesting to inform what you're doing now.
Well, I guess that's the hard part of like when we're talking about stem cells. Like when do those cells that are potentially going to become a human? When do they have a soul? When do they, And I'm not answering that question here today. But I understand.
Not a debate.
I can fully understand where both sides are coming from. Like it's not a black and white thing. It's very much like. Where? Like when did those things happen? And I can understand the fears around it, even if I post all these things about science, I post very politically strong opinions on what's going on right now. I don't not understand where the fear and the adversity against it comes from either, and I think that's important, and that's why yoga is so important. Yoga wants us to sit in discomfort.
Yes.
When you're doing things that are hard in yoga, it's not because we're trying to make you stronger physically. It does, but what it's doing is it's making you more resilient.
Yeah.
And it's making you feel the counterbalance of that discomfort.
The counterbalance and the balance at the same time, because you have to find yourself. You have to find yourself before you can speak on other things. And everyone finds themselves in different ways, and everyone has different views that they can kind of use to inform themselves. But if you don't sit in that moment of, I like to use a quote, suspended disbelief or suspended questioning. If you don't start from a place like that, then you can't learn and you can't grow. And a lot of this is about learning and growing. So that's really interesting, especially when you look at coming from religion, going into science, and then going into spirituality.
Yeah.
It's quite the route. And I say that everyone has such different journeys, and that's a lot of what we do here is we look at where people come from and how they get to where they're going, because so many spiritual practitioners look the same on the outside, but everyone's journey is so different.
Absolutely.
And I love that you're using yoga to kind of inform even just how you live around the house.
Yeah, like I said, I'll be the first to admit I'm not the best at having a good daily practice, so I have to intersperse little tidbits of my spirituality and my yoga practice and throughout how I live. I've never been great at like a consistent day-to-day routine.
No, and that's a lot of just the messiness of
Right?
life,
Yeah.
which is kind of how you have to take things with a grain of salt and take things to build a bigger picture of yourself.
For sure. Yeah.
I love that. I love that as like I think everyone can relate to the idea of we wish that we had the perfect sleep schedule. We wish we had the perfect diet, but you have access to what you have access to.
Oh, that's a huge one for me. That's why my classes are sliding scale.
Yep.
At least my weekly classes. My pop-ups, it's a little different because if I have to pay for a location, I have to make sure I can pay for the location.
Yep.
But my weekly classes are sliding scale. My Patreon, once I launch it, starts at $5 a month and goes all the way up to like what a gym membership would be, which is $60. But
Yes.
I have that very broad range. With the knowledge that people paying the higher end, I call it my pay it forward scale. So
Yeah.
those people know they're helping me pay for people who can't because, and so the reason I hate the word wellness, it's become a word that equates to inaccessibility.
Yes. And that's what you were talking about, where like certifications need to move towards a place where less advantaged people can get to a place where they can help other people, because something else that we have had as a common theme is you can't help other people until you struggle because you're going to be helping them with their struggles.
Mhm.
And so going through hard times, those hard times can sometimes keep you from access to education, certification, lessons. And if we make things like that more accessible, then more people will be able to enter those spaces and we'll have a more diverse, robust community able to help a more diverse,
Absolutely.
challenged members of the community, the people who need it the most.
And it's the hard balance because, like, do I need to pay my bills? Yeah,
Yes.
I do. And, like, I absolutely think all of us practitioners should get paid for the work we do. But there's got to be, and I'm not saying I figured it out, I really haven't, but there has to be that way that we can get paid for what we do in an equitable way while still not becoming inaccessible. Like I said, I have not figured that out yet, but I'm trying.
I mean, I know for me right now, the economy is such a struggle that I'm seeing a lot of people who can't afford readings, and I'm also getting messages from a lot of people that I know who are like, right now is when I could really use a reading. And I'm like, at this point, if you need a reading, reach out. And I specifically am on the same level where you're at, where like, there are people who can afford a reading and there are people who can't afford a reading, and I'm also sliding scale, but you have to reach out to me for it and not book through the website, because the website has to have set prices. And I'm at a point where I'm like, do I drop all of my prices and how far do I drop them? It's almost like as the price of food goes up, the price of readings needs to go down, but at what point am I not valuing myself?
Yeah, it's that hard line of like, I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying that we shouldn't all get paid for the work we do either.
Exactly.
But like, these people that need our services are also getting paid for the work they do, and it's clearly not enough.
Mm-hmm.
So like, where do we draw that line to where we become so inaccessible that it doesn't matter anymore?
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
And Kylie and I were talking about this too, right? It's not that we all need to make a living because we are all living. I'm not quite sure if I got that quote right, but she said it so beautifully, because we all have like human rights, and our human rights are to live, right? We're all born. We don't choose to be born. We don't choose to have to eat. We have to eat though. And there is kind of a mutual aid, right? Like there's mutual aid, and now is a great time for everyone to kind of ask themselves and dig deep how they can participate in mutual aid, because if you have it, other people don't. There are people who need it, and what's an ethical way to kind of help people who need it, who don't have it, and without hurting your own accessibility to things?
And without appearing to have savior issues too. Like, there's that
Oh my
line
God,
too.
yes.
Like, I don't want to step in and say, well, I clearly need to help you. Like,
Yep.
I need, there, especially again as white folks in Maine, like there's a fine line between falling into white savior complex,
Yep.
and we need to uplift voices, listen to voices, and not insert ourselves, and that can be hard too.
Yeah, I know, speaking on that, there's a tarot card, and I'm not great once we get into suits and the numbers, but there's a tarot card of charity where there are two people kind of begging at the foot of this man who's distributing coins to them. And I always call it a card of charity, and I was doing readings at like a fair, so it was rapid fire in this community, and it kept coming up. And I know for a fact that that community has extremely affluent members of the community and communities members who have like inherited property in that community and are struggling because they didn't pay to get there, they inherited it, and they're holding on to their family's place and they're struggling. And I kept kind of being like, well, maybe you need to seek out charity. And I had one woman say, that's a very stigmatized term. You should be telling people that they should be seeking out help. And whether that's like financial help or food help or certain things like that, that really kind of enlightened me to not everything that we do to help others needs to be charity, right? It can be for you without hitting that savior place, and it can be for them without them feeling shame. And I think so many of us feel shame reaching for charity, especially now when we're putting people down who need these benefits that maybe the higher ups don't want to give them anymore. And there's like a lot of shame around like terms like welfare queens and things like that. But there are people who are disabled. There are people who are differently abled, and those different roles in society too, right? Like certain people can't quite get access to things. Yeah, absolutely, it is difficult to be a practitioner right now because we know that people are struggling and we know that access is limited, but we also want to help. Yeah,
it's really important to me to make, as a person who, like I said, who has also struggled with weight and eating, and I grew up relatively poor, and I found access in the places by like working in them.
Yep.
My yoga teacher certification, speaking of affluence and how expensive these things are, my friends crowdfunded my down payment, and then I swept floors at the yoga studio.
Yes, right. You kind of have to grind and hustle to be able to do things.
To be able to afford it. And I think so many people, and it doesn't make them bad people, didn't have to necessarily struggle to pay for these things.
Right.
And that's okay too. Like, I'm glad that they didn't. But I also think that there becomes a disconnect in, well, I paid this money, I'm worth it. And yes, you are.
Yeah.
But don't forget that not everyone can.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't think they're bad people. I think a lot of times it's just a disconnect of what we see and what we're used to. Just like, I know we all have privilege over someone, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm at a point where I'm feeling very disadvantaged, and even I have to take a step back and say, oh, but I have the privilege to be able to eat, sleep, have a space, even if it's not quite that secure all the time. There are people who are so far behind that, right? They don't have the family, they don't have the support, and recognizing that is something that we all have to individually, what am I thinking of the word? Like, we kind of have to cope with, we kind of have to come to terms with.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so coming from any different place is difficult, especially, so do you find that this is an interesting kind of way to come at this? Do you find that it doesn't even matter what your accessibility is or your privilege is? Like, we all have to have that movement, and we all have similar struggles deep down with our body, no matter where we are?
I think so. I think access to help and information becomes more limited.
Yep.
But I don't think I have met anyone from any walk of life, at least in my years of doing this, who haven't all ultimately had those same struggles.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Everybody has a body. Everybody needs to move their body, and everyone needs to move it in a different way. I'm glad that you have kind of that individualized approach.
Yeah, it's really, like, I personally, well, like, if you take my group fitness class, obviously, my group classes, I can only show so many variations. I try and do the best I can, and I try and make it as humanly accessible and safe as possible, but at the end of the day, it's for people to decide whether it's safe for them and whether it is accessible. And that is the hard thing about a group fitness setting in particular, is because we're moving so quickly usually that unless I have people that are used to my movement who can follow while I walk away to help with variations of something else, it can mean that I'm bouncing around a lot, and people can get confused if they're not used to my cadence. So that is a struggle, is making sure that I still let people who need to be more challenged have that more challenge, and people who need more variation to get that variation. But at the end of the day, group also makes it more accessible because I can offer lower prices for group.
Nice. Yes, because that is that same kind of mutual aid thing. Yeah. I know that there's someone who does yoga in Portland, Ashley Flowers, and she has just she'll do yoga out in a field. I can't quite remember what field, but
Sunflower Farm Creamery. That's one of the places she's worked.
That's interesting. I know. I think it was Payson Park where I took hers. And she just has a coffee can, and I think she even closes her eyes at the end of it, and she's like, "All right, if you can fill the can, fill the can. If you can't, go home."
Yep.
Love you all. It's a very you can offer in a group setting because you know the people who can, and the people who can't still needed it.
Yeah, last year with Congress Square Park, I just did free classes.
Yep.
In the park, and if people paid, the payment was to Congress Square to donate to the upkeep of the park, not to me.
Nice. That's a great thing to offer, but that's also really selfless.
It was. And this sounds silly because as artists and things, we don't want to work for exposure.
Yeah.
But things like that do also give me exposure.
Yeah. That's how I am with First Fridays.
It's another hard one too, because again, we want to pay our artist friends.
Yep.
But sometimes you also have to get your name out. So where's the balance of making sure that you're getting your name out too?
Yeah.
And so for me, if doing some free classes also gets my name out to where I can get paid, am I benefiting from the free? Yeah, I am.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's still also providing a service that I want to provide.
Yep.
So
helping people, but also helping people find you.
Yeah.
That is important.
Which again, like I said, there's that thing in my brain that's that's kind of gross. You're still ultimately trying to get business.
Yeah. Yes, that's the difficult one. But I think a lot of us, if we are coming from it from an authentic place, we would be doing it if we didn't get paid anyway.
Yeah.
I had an interview Monday, the interview before this one, where he was saying that he liked to help people and his students. He really appreciated if his students seemed like people who'd be doing it anyway. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of us would be doing these practices with or without the money, right? Mm-hmm. If we were millionaires, we would be doing it anyway for people. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is good for kind of me to hear because like I said, my practice is at a point where I understand people can't pay the full prices, and there is kind of an inherent unspoken unionized kind of mentality between readers and practitioners where we don't want to lower our prices so much that we're invading on other people's business. I try to keep an industry standard, and the industry standard, realistically, it should be going up, but I feel like I'm going to have to bring it down, and that balance is really difficult. But where people are struggling financially and mentally, subconsciously, I don't know. I'm actually at a point where I kind of want to stop offering astrology and only offer tarot, but offer tarot for less money because I feel like it's not going to solve everybody's problems, and I don't want people to live by tarot, but it does give them enough food for thought to maybe make it through these times.
Yeah.
So kind of finding that balance, but it's also a time when I'm going to be struggling to find food and shelter and things like that, because I think we know that with everything else going up, rent is going to be going up, and we have to keep where we're keeping ourselves, And I know for me, I kind of want to go get my master's, and it's almost I feel the pull to do that, but I also am fully aware that that is something that is not going to be easy to afford when I'm already paying for my student loans for my lower education. And it would help my business, but it's that certification thing you were talking about is
keeping those certifications adds up.
I have none, and I feel bad that I have none sometimes, but I don't want to pay for the courses.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't think the courses are really valuable, but I also can find the information in books, and I can find the information from practicing myself. It's a really difficult balance in that. So props to you for seeking out those certifications.
I also find that insurance-wise, it protects me more.
Yep, absolutely.
Because I'm working with bodies.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And you're keeping kind of more safety.
Mm-hmm. That protects me, having those certifications. It's a protection. Most of what I know, most of my trainings I've had, I'll be honest, I didn't study because I've already known all that information for a really long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I basically just test out of them
But
to get those letters behind my name.
So is it by the state?
No, these are just certifying bodies. So, like, my certified personal trainer is through the National Academy of Sports Medicine.
Interesting.
And I'm not saying I disregard their information. I obviously know it because I passed the tests.
Right.
It's more that just, yeah, I wish there was a way that I could just pay to take the test
Yeah, absolutely.
for that same reason. Like,
Or
I'm
that
getting
it
a lot
would
of my
last
information.
longer,
Yeah.
or like until things were big changes, right? Like every
Mhm.
10 years would be a good time to.
When there's new data available.
Yep.
Exactly. So no shade on the organizations, but the letters behind my name are primarily as a protection for myself. It gives me accreditation.
What are those letters?
CPT, Certified Personal Trainer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an AFA. So AFA is Aerobics and Fitness Association of America.
This is your test.
Yeah. And that one, I'm group fitness certified, so that means I can safely teach groups.
Yep.
I have a holistic health coaching certification from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering how nutrition came into play.
Yeah. For me, it started, I took the course for me to as a part of trying to work on my eating disorder.
Nice. Yes, that's actually beautiful.
And as a fitness instructor, you get a lot of questions about food and health and eating. And this is another way. So they tell you and they remind you in any training you take, don't give out advice that you're not certified for.
Yep.
But so many of your students want that information.
So then you seek out the certification so that you can help them.
And this way, I can legally. Now, am I a registered dietitian? No. And if people need something more in depth and more like critical food care in particular, I would send them to a registered dietitian.
Yeah.
Specifically, there's one locally that is a healthy at any size group. That's out of
Nice.
Forum, which is probably where I'd send people
Yeah.
because it's not one that's like
Gonna shame.
Yeah.
Or focus on weight loss.
yes. When I say I'm a holistic health coach, like we will work on better eating practices. But if you have like a true disordered eating or things like that, like that's not my field. That's outside my purview of safety. But it does mean that I can at least inform you in a safe way if your questions are general.
Yeah,
and I'm
absolutely.
not stepping outside my practice to do that.
And certain pieces are psychological pieces that you have to work on deep
Mhm.
down. You have to really search to get to that place before you can even get to a dietitian.
Yeah,
That's a tough
absolutely.
one. But like certain pieces of it, what would be your nutrition advice that you are certified to give for anyone wondering?
So for a lot of people, it's add, don't subtract.
Love.
Rather than saying I need to cut back on my calories, it's like, well, where can you add something green into your everyday?
Yeah.
Where can you add like one more green thing?
And what's an accessible way to get to those?
Where can you add one more fruit?
Yep.
So the focus being more on wholeness as opposed to subtraction.
I love that.
Like I recently had a friend who has lost a lot of weight very quickly because has autoimmune issues, so she's very strict autoimmune diet right now, and she was struggling with potentially losing muscle mass, but she wasn't eating before her workouts. So, and I was like, I know it feels icky. It's gonna take your body maybe even a month to get used to it,
Right.
but maybe an hour before your workouts, try to have something with some protein and some fat.
Yep.
Because that's going to fuel you, especially for muscle building. You need that protein in there. And if you're going into your workout without enough there, your body will actually defer to eating muscle too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So things like that, like where people are like, well, then I have too many calories. Like, actually, no. I promise you it'll balance out eventually. Like, granted, binge eating disorders, actual eating disorders, that's like I said, that's outside my purview.
Absolutely.
If you need to work on that, that's elsewhere. And it's very true that if you have a full-on binge eating disorder, yes, you could be still adding extra calories.
I've been there.
Same. I have a binge eating disorder. But when I tell someone to add something, typically if they are in a healthy mindset about it, it balances itself out.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, as a fitness instructor, for so many years, people just would ask me food questions, and I would have to say, like, I can't answer that.
Like liability-wise.
Liability-wise. So at least now I can answer in a way that, yes, I have the certification within this realm still.
And
but
it
at
helps-
least, yeah.
It helps you.
Yes, it
This
helps me
is
too.
Another one of the times where people who struggle with certain things are the people who can help people down the line who have similar struggles. And so it's always really hard to go through them. But it's nice to find a client and know that you have the experience to help them and you're coming from like a genuine place.
Well, if I'm referring them to, say, like a healthy at every size dietitian, it's because I'm coming from it from like, this I definitely know is outside my purview. And I've actually worked with the reason I would send people to this place is because I've worked with them. They're very good.
An ethical way to do it, for sure.
Yeah. So I know that they're a good place to go if you have body dysmorphia, if you have a risk of eating disorders. Like, they're not a dietitian who's going to be like, maybe you remove all bread. Like, that's not going to be beneficial to someone who has a binge eating disorder. Like, just telling you to remove. I had a dietitian recently, like the last year, trying to tell me to just remove more bread from my diet. And I'm like, you don't understand what you just did to my brain.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. But also, sometimes if you, and I'm definitely not one who's certified to speak on this, but sometimes if you are missing certain pieces of your diet, you'll be driven towards eating. And if you go back to the things that aren't giving you those nutrients, then you're going to keep eating to try to get to them. And so when you know what you're missing, but you're getting a full kind of the full spectrum of nutrients, then you're probably going to be more satisfied.
And that's why I work on an additive. And it's not to say that things won't come out, and I won't suggest, like, elimination diets can be and I am trained on elimination diets. Elimination diets can be beneficial as long as you don't overdo it.
Yeah.
Just like any kind of diet. Like, it's a diet because it is more strict. Eliminations can, if done correctly in a shorter window, where you add things back slowly, inform you on what you might actually be intolerant to or not digest well or things of that nature. Which is
something you have to go to a different type of doctor for, like, realistically.
Yeah.
And I think the word diet is kind of stigmatized, right? Because in, like, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s,
the 90s.
Yeah, I think of Tyra a lot, right? Is we all got very... Tyra and Janice Dickinson really did a number on our psyches when we were growing up. But the term diet sounds like cut everything out. Don't eat. Do the Tic Tac diet, RuPaul, right?
Yeah.
Tic Tac for breakfast, Tic Tac for lunch, and a glass of water for dinner.
Yep.
But there maybe is like a better term for it, where it's replacing, finding better things. Because the term diet kind of harkens back to a time where people just stopped eating, which drove the disorders that a lot of us kind of dealt with when we were younger.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's the certifications are for that, so that I can protect myself, but also I'm within the bounds of what I legally should be talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you know better for yourself. That's beautiful. That's a really beautiful way to think about certifications, is it helps you when you're practicing, because movement must be something that you practice, like you said, maybe not day to day, but it is kind of, is it what you go to fix when you're feeling...
Yeah, I'm one of those gross people who actually really likes exercise.
I mean, I think we all are if we do it enough, right? If we get comfortable with it.
I truly, and I have to actually be more careful about this since my back injury. I'm the person who likes a hard workout. I want you to kick my ass.
Yeah.
And so now my mind frame shift is like, okay, you're getting into your 40s, and your hormones are changing, and those hard workouts aren't what your body needs anymore, despite the fact that you're drawn to them. But yeah, I'm that person who, like, I always joke with my partner that a lot of my students are people who don't like to work out at all.
Yeah.
And it makes it difficult because I'm the one who's still like, woo, and they're like,
all right, I'm going at my pace.
Yeah.
I appreciate your pace, but I'm going to slow down.
Yeah. And I guess what I would love to instill is a joy of movement in people that I have.
Hormonal changes is one that I can definitely relate to with HRT, because it's just such a huge change to your body, and sometimes I know the pharmaceutical industry had, like, not to get too far into it, they had like a shortage, and it was really difficult to get for like months, and I felt those hormonal changes happening and adjusting yourself to it, because also when you're on estrogen, there's atrophy of muscles is like really common.
Yes, strength training is huge for estrogen increase. That's why I say when women going into their 40s, 50s, you want to back away from that high intensity workout more, because that's going to raise your cortisol and actually be not as good for protecting your mind. I'm not saying not to do cardio, but the really high intensity interval training especially, which we love for fat loss. More buzzwords.
I'm really guilty of that one.
I love HIIT training, don't get me wrong. But we love it. At the same time, those of us who are on the verge of estrogen increases should really be doing more strength training, less high intensity.
Yeah, and having an individualized workout routine is really important. I know when I was in Orono, I lost 100 pounds, and it was maybe, so I did a year for up there for college, and it was maybe not the healthiest at all times. But I had a hockey player who was a nutrition and physics. Her major
Yeah.
was in exercise
Yeah.
and diet. And I talked to her specifically about what I should be eating, and she built an exercise regimen for me that I did religiously every day at the gym, back when I had 24-hour access to a gym.
Oh God, college was nice for that, wasn't
Oh
it?
my god, yes. I got to art school and I was like, oh man, we don't have a gym here. But the weight loss was individualized because she told me how many reps on this machine, how long to be on this machine, this warms you up,
Yes.
this cools you down. And breaking through the stigma of being like overweight and queer in a gym was very difficult.
Oh, sure.
But once I cut it out and kind of put my headphones in and just did what she told me, I felt and I saw the body changes that I was seeking. So having an instructor who knows what they're doing is really important to those things, because otherwise you can push yourself in the wrong direction or too much.
Absolutely, and reminding people that rest is still important.
Mhm.
Like, and active rest day, and I say that rest is still important. I usually encourage people to take an active rest day, which means like still taking a walk.
Yep.
You
Yeah,
know,
you have
like
to get fresh
doing
air.
something, but not like a workout. Like
Yep.
wiggle in your living room, dance for a little bit in your living room. You know,
Yeah.
like
Literally.
just like get your body moving just a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's your rest day. So like a lot of people say like, well, you don't actually need rest days. Like it depends on what you're going for.
Yep.
And like no, you don't need to not move at all.
Mhm.
But yeah, you should have, like I said, at least a walk.
Yep.
Dogs are great for that too.
Stagnation is
Mhm.
really kind of dangerous at some
Yeah.
point, right? And you can get that Reiki healing, or you can work on your chakras, or you can play frequencies, you can do your singing bowl. But at the end of the day, getting that blood pumping and moving is just as much a spiritual practice
Yes.
as like a reading or
Absolutely,
something.
especially if you can do it outside.
Yep.
Especially if you can do it with like fresh air and without headphones.
Interesting, connecting to nature kind of, or like
Mhm.
being comfortable
Or
with silence.
Being comfortable with silence, and it's another part of that. Like, and don't get me wrong, I'm a person who like if I'm going for a run, I kind of need the bumping.
Yeah.
Like, but especially on people's rest days for like a walk, I suggest doing it without sound, because that's another place of discomfort. You're stuck with yourself.
I've always thought that that was kind of an odd part of the gym. If you go to like a Planet Fitness or something, they'll be playing the radio overhead, and it's like, if you want music, you should bring your headphones, and it's individualized. But I've gone and forgotten my headphones before, and I've been like, this music is just not jiving with me. It's not feeding my psychological part of the workout.
Mhm.
It's interesting how much that I like the idea of like a stillness, a quiet workout, because there's a lot of psychological healing that you're getting when you're moving that is then interrupted by the music.
Mhm. Like I don't play music in my yoga classes.
Nice.
I want people. Music takes you out of your body,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not saying it cannot put you in. Like dance puts you back in,
Right,
for sure. But in a yoga practice, especially if you're holding something uncomfortable and you start bopping to a beat, you're not paying attention to that discomfort,
Yeah.
and you're not necessarily like you could do something that could harm you too,
Yep.
because you're not connecting. And I've actually had people say like,
Oh, I see what you're saying. You can push yourself too hard because the music and
It's
the
helping distract
mentality.
you.
Because we do have a mentality culturally, right? That's just very, not to speak on this, but like it's kind of masculinized to the point where like finding your own space, even if you're anywhere on that gender spectrum, finding your own space is difficult because you kind of project that mentality, and you can cut yourself off from it. And like music can kind of help you, but it can also feed that pump it up, pump it up, pump it up. Yeah,
Mhm.
and then
Yeah.
you ignore how your body's
so
responding.
it's I like for my fitness classes, I like using music because music helps you drive the movement.
Yep.
But for my yoga classes, I find that it's a brain distraction. So like,
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that music should be nowhere in mindfulness, because it can also be part of mindfulness. But I find that in a yoga space, unless it's yin where you're holding something for like 5 to 10 minutes, that's a little different. Like yin is a sinking into a posture type
Interesting.
practice. So I'll use binaural beats for yin.
Yes, we've heard about those in these interviews
Yeah,
too.
I'll use binaural music because that's keeping you still grounded, but it's there to help get you through 10 minutes of discomfort. right?
Yeah.
Whereas, and I mean, not all yin postures are just uncomfortable, but holding anything for 10 minutes is a lot.
Absolutely.
Even if it's
100%.
comfortable.
Even if it's a glass of water.
Yeah, literally. But then in fitness, like, yeah, I don't want people pulling out of it necessarily. I still want them being in their bodies. But like I say, it helps drive the movement
Yeah,
too.
absolutely. And
So.
there is something to be said about not torturing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you are turned off by exercise, maybe it's because you're torturing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, so many people think that if they're not in pain, they're not doing it right, which is
Not true.
not true. And that is a very masculine
Yep.
ideology. And that's what I used to say, that I moved to less punishing practices
Yeah.
as I've progressed in my.
And it sounds like you kind of help people find a consistent place to approach their body image, instead of that like bulk cut, lean, like seasonal, completely changing your body. Like,
Longevity is the way I look at it.
and sustainability.
And sustainability. What are you going to do every day, or at least every week,
Mhm.
consistently, versus are you going to go hard 3 days a week and then crash the other 4
Because you need those rest
because
days.
you've gone so hard?
They might have to be active rest days, but you do need those rest days, right?
Mhm.
Because you need the lactic acid to keep flowing, or
Yes.
you also need it to be processed correctly.
Mhm.
Again, I don't know too much. I was a biology nerd in high school, but that does not mean I did it in art school.
Fair. Yeah, it's there is the idea, like, there are people who go hard,
hmm
but then they are sedentary the other like 4 days of the week
Yeah.
because they've gone so hard,
Or they go so hard that they quit the exercise completely.
or they injure themselves. And again, there are bodybuilders and things like that go hard all the time, and that's
And
part
God
of their
bless you.
right.
You are doing it great in your own way.
And I'm not shitting on those practices either.
No,
but that's
absolutely
they've
not.
found a consistency for them. It depends on your brain. Like,
Yes.
it really truly depends on your brain. Those people, like, their brain craves it, their body craves it. People who tend to come to me, I have to find that consistency because they don't have that craving.
Yes, and also it's finding a place that you're comfortable in your body.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I know for me, and it's interesting that you said that with estrogen and weight training. For me, I avoid weight training so much because I'm afraid that it's going to cause dysphoria.
Yes, we can talk.
Interesting.
We can talk.
Actually, I love that. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, we can talk.
And if you do want to talk to her, where can people find you?
Movevolve.com, Movevolve.com, and I'm MOV_E_volve on Instagram. Those are the 2 primary places. I teach weekly yoga classes at Terrarium in Portland on Sundays at 10 a.m. They do sell out. We only have 10 spots because it's in the plant shop, so it's small.
I love that. What a great place to do
Yeah,
that.
it's so beautiful. And except for one Sunday a month, I do a pop-up class at Freedom's Edge Cider, and that rotates between fitness and yoga. And then I also teach a fitness class here at Ruby Manor Tuesday nights, 3 or 4 weeks of the month. It's a 5-week month.
Mhm.
On Tuesday nights at 6:30 p.m. It is also sliding scale, as is my yoga class. It starts at $5, goes all the way up to $25 pay it forward,
Mhm.
with $15 being my standard price, but you can pay anywhere. A lot of people apologize to me if they can't pay the $15. I'm like, no, I made it sliding scale for a reason.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Please don't avoid coming to class just because you can't pay the $15. It's sliding scale for a reason. I did that on purpose. So movevolve.com, MOVEVOLVE.com. I offer personal training and health coaching through that as well. I offer individualized pricing for that. I do not have my pricing on the website for those because that's more of a discussion. Your first 30-minute consultation is free, where we can discuss pricing though.
Nice. Wow, what a
Yeah.
great way to do it.
So, and your needs. That's what the consultation is for. Discuss what you're looking for, what your needs are, and to see if we're right to work together.
Yeah. And so do you find yourself saying, like, maybe I'm not the right person for you often, or?
I have in the past, like I said, I'm just bumping up health coaching and such again after
Mhm.
years of like not having the time for it. Back when I first got health coach certified, yeah, there were a couple people who truly just wanted it for strictly weight loss,
Yeah.
and I was worried it would fuel eating disorders in them,
Right.
no matter how I approached it,
Mhm.
and I want them to see a professional dietitian instead.
I love that.
So,
That's a really good way to approach it, especially when you kind of are trying to stay spiritually aligned.
yeah, and I don't want what I do to trigger further disorders, further dysphoria, further dysmorphia.
Because you should be coming at it from the right mental state.
And I'm not saying that people who have eating disorders and stuff shouldn't come to me. I just also want them working with someone who is helping that side because I am not
And
licensed
maybe
to do so.
exercise isn't quite the place to
Yeah.
start
Yes.
on that journey.
Exactly.
I love that. I love how quickly you snapped into it. You have your where to find me very
I
well.
do. Yeah. I'm pretty attached to my business.
And with terrarium,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to know. So, do you feel like the plants? This is a very woo-woo question, and I am pushing maybe a little too far into the interview from the look Mason's giving me. Do you almost feel like the plants are like participating?
Oh yeah, it's I personally feel like one, they're literally giving us oxygen.
Yes, yes. What a great point to make.
Like if you want to go outside the woo, they're quite literally giving us oxygen.
Yes,
And we are quite literally, our waste of our breath is feeding them as well.
I love that.
So if you think of it in that way, you don't even have to go woo with it. That's the actual scientific facts of what's happening in that space.
Which is a great example of where science can inform kind of the woo-woo. Is also
Exactly.
we have some evidence that plants have like a consciousness that reacts to us without us even really knowing. That we'll go into that another time when I find a plant person. But
You should interview Rob or Anna from Terrarium.
oh,
You should reach out to Anna.
I love that. I will. I actually will. I've been having a hard time reaching out to people because I want to find the right people, and I also don't want to seem what's the word? Solicitatious.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Anna, come to the shop and just chat with Anna one of these days.
That sounds
Yeah.
beautiful.
Because I also work there on Saturdays and Sundays just because what I currently do doesn't make me a lot of money. And
Yeah.
as much as my partner could carry us, I grew up as an only child who has very much relied on myself, and I was like, I need to have some kind of extra income.
In these days, dual income is the way to go
Yeah.
if you can manage it.
And like leaving my corporate job was a big,
Oh, yes.
big jump.
Oh, I wish I had gotten enough time to talk to you about that too, because leaving the corporate to follow your goal or your follow your
It was
heart.
like a year-long panic attack before I did it.
Yeah, I had an interview with Bridget Esselmont, and she was talking about how like the leaving the corporate into going into like a spiritual counseling kind of place was very much like you need to wait for the signs, you need to wait for things to align. I maybe jumped out of my job a little too soon to go into reading, especially because I didn't know where the economy was going. But yeah, the day job's coming up for me too, for sure.
Yeah, it's a thing.
All right, this has been the Lucky Rabbits Talk Show. I am so honored to have had our guest today, and I hope you guys go back and watch other episodes. I hope you stay tuned because we have more episodes coming out. This one should be coming out, I think, the end of February, beginning of March. We're trying to do weekly drops. So stay tuned. Every Wednesday, we should have an episode for you on.